Have you ever heard that voice inside your head that never seems to quiet down? It's there when you wake up in the morning, make decisions, or even in the quietest of moments. It's that voice that criticizes, judges, demands, and sometimes even sabotages. This constant inner chatter gives no rest. From the moment we open our eyes, it starts. You didn't sleep enough. Today is going to be tough. Why did you say that yesterday? You're not good enough. This endless stream of thoughts becomes so present that most of the time we don't even notice it's there. We grow so accustomed to this chatter that we begin to confuse it with who we really are. But I want you to ask yourself something simple yet deeply transformative. What if that voice isn't you? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a place of complete silence. No thoughts, no judgments, no words, just emptiness, a space of total stillness. Who are you in that moment? Where is that voice that never seems to stop? This simple exercise already reveals something profound. There's a difference between the voice that speaks and the one who listens. The problem is, we spend our entire lives identifying with that voice. We believe we are that constant inner dialogue, and that's exactly where the suffering begins. That thought saying, "You're not good enough," isn't who you are. It's just a thought, a conditioned reflection. That voice is like an echo of your experiences, traumas, expectations and fears accumulated over the years. It's like a program running in the background, influencing your emotions, decisions, and even how you perceive reality. That voice, which we can call the ego, is a mental construct that begins to form in childhood. From an early age, we absorb beliefs and ideas about who we are, what we can do, and how we should behave. These beliefs don't arise out of nowhere. They're shaped by experiences with our parents, teachers, friends, society, and the culture around us. If, as a child, someone told you that you weren't good enough at something, that idea might have been recorded in your mind. Later, it reappears as automatic thoughts. You can't do it. You're not capable. The ego, in its relentless quest to protect this constructed identity, reinforces these messages, creating an internal narrative that seems like absolute truth. You try to start a new project, and the voice says, "What if you fail? Better not even try." You receive a compliment, but the voice counters, "They're just being polite. You don't deserve it." You make a mistake, and the voice explodes, "See? You always mess things up." These automatic thoughts repeat like a broken record, and the more we identify with them, the more we believe these limitations are real. The ego wants control. It wants to keep you in a safe place where there's no rejection, failure, or pain. But this safety is an illusion, because what the ego considers safe is often a prison. It keeps us stuck in repetitive patterns, avoiding anything that challenges our comfort zone. Think, for instance, of the last time you wanted to try something new, maybe start a course, change jobs, or travel alone. As soon as that idea came up, your inner voice likely started questioning, can you really do it? What if it goes wrong? People are going to judge you. These questions don't show up to help. They appear to keep you in the same place. To the ego, the unknown is a threat. But what it doesn't tell you is that by avoiding the unknown, you're also avoiding growth. Let me tell you a story to illustrate this more clearly. William woke up every day at 5 a.m. sharp. Before he could even reach out to turn off his alarm, it started. The voice. "You didn't sleep enough. Today's going to be tough. Remember that meeting. What are you going to say? What if they ask questions you don't know how to answer? You should have prepared more." He tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The day hadn't even started, and he already felt the weight on his body. As he sipped his coffee, the voice kept going, listing everything he needed to do, bringing up past mistakes, and painting catastrophic scenarios for the future. At work, nothing ever seemed enough. Even when he met deadlines or received praise from colleagues, the voice was there to neutralize any sense of relief or pride. "They're just being polite, William. You're not that good. Sooner or later, someone will realize you're not up to the task. You need to try harder, much harder." And so, he did. Working overtime, taking on more tasks, always trying to prove something he didn't even know to whom. The harder he tried, the more he felt like he was sinking. That night, William felt like he was at his limit. It was another day where it seemed like he was running in circles, going nowhere. The accumulated weight of expectations from work, family, friends, and most of all himself, was unbearable. When he got home, he dropped his backpack on the floor and collapsed on the couch, too drained even to turn on the TV. He was completely exhausted. Yet, even in that moment, the voice continued. "You should be doing something productive. You're wasting time. There are still emails to respond to. What if your boss asks about that report tomorrow? Why do you always leave things half-finished?" William closed his eyes, trying to ignore it, but that only amplified the noise. The voice wouldn't stop. It revisited old mistakes, anticipated future problems, and painted scenarios of failure. He felt as if he were trapped in a whirlwind of thoughts, unable to find even a moment of peace. Then, something unexpected happened. Amid the mental chaos, a question emerged, as clear as a drop of water falling into a lake. If I'm the one talking, then who's listening? William froze. That simple yet profound question echoed in his mind. Who was he? The voice, or something beyond it? Out of curiosity, or perhaps desperation, he decided to try something different. Instead of fighting with the voice or trying to silence it, William simply listened. He didn't attempt to counter the criticisms or solve the problems it brought up. He just observed, like someone watching a river flow. At first, it was uncomfortable. The chatter seemed deafening, like a storm. But as he continued observing, something curious happened. The voice began to lose its power. For a few seconds, William experienced something new. Silence. Not external silence, but internal silence. He slowly opened his eyes, feeling something strange yet comforting. Peace. The next morning, William woke up to the voice in his head, as usual, but this time, something was different. He still felt the weight of the demands. The thoughts still came strongly, but for the first time, he didn't react automatically. While making his coffee, he heard the voice begin, "You need to review that presentation. What if your boss doesn't like it? And that meeting today? What's going to happen?" Normally, William would have been swept away, feeling anxious before even leaving the house. But this time, he took a deep breath and stopped. Instead of reacting, he just observed the voice. He didn't try to silence it or argue with it. He simply thought to himself, "It's just a thought, it's not the truth." Those simple words, repeated like a mantra, changed everything. He realized that when he observed his thoughts from the outside, they lost their power. It was like watching a storm from a safe distance, knowing it couldn't touch him. That day, William understood something that seemed so obvious, yet he had never noticed. He had a choice. For years, he believed he had to react to everything the voice said. But now he knew he didn't have to obey it. He could let the thoughts pass, like leaves floating down a river. On the bus to work, the voice returned. "You won't manage today. The meeting will be a disaster. They'll realize you're not as good as they think." This time, William did something more. He questioned the voice. Is this true? Or is it just something my mind keeps repeating? Deep down, he knew most of his thoughts weren't based on facts. They were projections, stories created by fear and insecurity. This realization brought a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. When he arrived at work, William still carried the same worries, but now there was something different, a space between him and his thoughts. He realized he didn't have to carry all those worries at once. He could focus on one task at a time without letting the mental chatter overwhelm him. As he reviewed the presentation, the voice began to criticize. "You're taking too long, this isn't good enough." But instead of panicking, William paused, took a deep breath, and remembered the words from that morning. "It's just a thought. It's not the truth." He continued working on the presentation at his own pace without giving in to the pressure. When he finished, he realized the work was good. Not perfect, but good enough. These small victories began to add up throughout the day. Each time the voice appeared, William took a step back, observed it, and chose how to respond. It was a constant exercise, but with each attempt, he felt he was regaining control of his life. That night, when he got home, William sat on the couch and did something he hadn't done in a long time. He reflected on the day positively. He didn't dwell on mistakes or failures, but instead recalled the moments when he had managed to observe the voice and not let it dominate him. He realized that in a single day, he had already made significant progress. For the first time, he saw the voice as a conditioned reflex, not an absolute truth. More importantly, he understood that the path to freedom was built through conscious choices, and he was capable of making them. William's journey was only beginning, but he had taken the first and most important step, realizing that he was not the voice in his head. He was the one who listened. William knew negative thoughts would keep coming, and that on some days, the ego would try to reclaim control. But now, he had something powerful on his side, the awareness that he had a choice. Awareness was like a light, illuminating every dark corner of the mental prison that once seemed inescapable. He began to see thoughts as clouds in the sky, some dark and heavy, others light and fleeting. But no matter the type of cloud, he knew the sky behind them remained blue, untouched and unchanging. That sky, he discovered, was his true essence, the silent, spacious self, free from the constant noise of the mind. This small but fundamental first step changed something profound in William. He realized that freedom wasn't something to be found in the future, in a distant place. It had always been there, in the present, waiting for him to recognize it. It was the space between one thought and the next. It was the pause before reacting. It was the silence that emerged when he simply observed the voice without identifying with it. With this discovery, William began to walk a new path, a path toward a lighter, more authentic life, connected to who he truly was. From that day on, his mornings no longer felt so heavy. The fog that had once clouded his mind started to lift. He realized that the voice, though persistent and critical, was not invincible. It was like a shadow. It appeared bigger and scarier than it truly was. More importantly, he discovered something he had once overlooked: silence. That nearly imperceptible space between thoughts became a refuge. At first, it was uncomfortable. William didn't know what to do with that emptiness, as if standing in front of a mirror and not recognizing his own reflection. But slowly, he learned to embrace the silence, to feel it as a gentle hug. In that space, he began to rediscover himself. He realized he didn't need to be perfect or meet every expectation imposed by others or himself. It was enough to pause, observe, and remember. I am more than the voice in my head. That phrase became his mantra, a guide in his journey. On difficult days, when the old prison of thoughts threatened to return, he would take a deep breath and repeat those words. It wasn't a magical solution, but it was a start. Over time, William realized that the peace he was searching for wasn't far away. It had always been there, within him, waiting to be uncovered. Every small step he took, pausing to look at the sky, taking a moment for gratitude, choosing not to react to a negative thought, was a victory. Of course, he still had hard days when the voice grew louder, insisting on replaying his mistakes or fueling his fears. But now, William knew he wasn't alone. He had a powerful tool, his awareness. And so, his journey continued. It wasn't a straight line, but a dance, between light and shadow, between the noise of the mind and the silence of the heart. Each day he felt freer, more whole. William discovered that true peace isn't the absence of challenges, but the presence of oneself. This story teaches us something essential. The voice in our head, with its criticisms and demands, does not define us. It's merely a reflection of past experiences and the stories we've learned to believe. But no matter how persistent that voice may be, it is not invincible, and above all, it is not you. When we begin to observe our thoughts with curiosity and compassion without identifying with them, something extraordinary happens. A space emerges, a deep silence between the words. In that silence, we find what we truly are, a presence that doesn't need labels or justifications. This search for the true self is an act of courage, an invitation to go beyond the ego and free ourselves from the stories that limit our freedom. And it all begins with one small step. Perhaps it's a pause, a moment to ask yourself, who am I without the stories I tell about myself?